Great. Well, I'll just get us started since we are at the top of the hour. And everybody, welcome to the our second meeting of the Silver Falls School District Budget Committee. I'm going to call everything to order here. And Debbie, if you can note attendance, that would be great. I want to, Drew asked me to read a statement, and this is a little bit of a technical statement based on us using Zoom as our communication platform right now. So if you can just bear with me, I'm going to read this, and Debbie's going to put this up on the screen, and everybody just follow along. That'd be great. Welcome, everybody. This is a new environment, and it is important for us to revisit established norms of engagement in this online system, especially as technology tools like Zoom and other platforms are updated. Tonight, you may have noticed an audible notification that the meeting is being recorded, and that will save some time at the start of our meetings. In addition, you'll notice that chat is not at the bottom of your screen. Tonight, we'll use Zoom gestures and the ability to raise hand, turn on the microphone and camera, and to communicate with one another. While Zoom records in-meeting everyone chat and allows users to archive their private chat manually, it does not automatically save private chat conversations between participants. As the Zoom platform is updated, these settings may be updated, but chat will remain disabled for tonight. And we'll use the gestures provided to us in the bottom right of your corner of your screen as an alternative. As always, please allow for brief delays as folks turn on and off their devices to speak and to stay muted when you're not speaking to improve the quality of our audio in our meeting. Thanks in advance for your patience and as we get started with this tonight. Okay, first thing on our agenda is I'd like to address a little bit on budget committee decorum. And as we all know, last week we did have an incident, and I would like to right now give Jacob Clodfelter the floor to address our budget committee and our board and our public at large tonight.
Thank you, Aaron. This is Jacob. I've got 2 points I need to address here real quick. The first point is I have a bit of a family situation that I need to attend to. And so when I'm done with my second point, I'm going to need to log off of the meeting and I will not be able to attend. I'm actually traveling right now and I'm just pulled off onto the side of the road. And so anyways, that's point number one. Point number two is at the towards the end of the last budget committee meeting, we were getting close to wrapping up and Director Nealon was beginning to speak, and I had a comment that was caught with a hot mic, if you will, and it was an inappropriate comment, and I didn't even really realize what I had done until the next morning when I'd had a chance to talk with a couple of folks and heard what everybody else heard, and that's when I realized that, oh shoot, that was indeed me. So Director Nealon, entire budget committee, school board, all of the Silver Falls staff that was there, any member of the public that was there and heard what was said and may have been offended, I apologize. It was inappropriate, it was dumb, and I have definitely used that incident as a learning experience since then, because in this environment we're all using Zoom and Microsoft Teams quite a bit, and so it's been a bit of a learning experience to see how those microphones are pretty sensitive, and you've really got to make sure that the mute button is turned on if you're not intending the entire world to hear what you're saying. So again, I apologize, and that's it.
All right, thank you, Jacob. I appreciate that. I know everyone here does as well. And I just want to say for the record that in addition to his verbal apology tonight, Jacob did write us, the board, the budget committee as well, a written apology. So I just want to make sure that was on the record as well. In light of, yes,
I want to add one more thing here. For tonight, Director Nealon contacted me and explained that her voice is affected right now. She's unable to speak clearly. So she is emailed to me, and I'm going to read on her behalf words that she has said. So she just wanted to say thank you, Jacob.
Okay, great. Thank you. As we kind of move forward from this, the board and I have discussed this or a little bit more, and the board has come up with a statement that we'd like to read that will pertain to our committee here, to the board, and to all the other committees. So Debbie, if you could put that up for me, I'd like to read this and make sure everybody could see this as well.
Real quick, while we're waiting for this, I'm trying to raise a hand. Peter here. I'm having some folks that are having trouble logging in. So can we address that? Folks trying to get into this Zoom meeting?
Sarah, Lisa, and Dawn Tacker. Which one?
I'm looking at currently Sarah Wheatsman is having trouble getting in.
On our way in now.
Aaron, can you see the message now?
Yeah, and I hope everybody else can see this as well. So again, this is something that our board has helped develop, and we just want to make sure this is very clear going forward. So the Silver Falls School District Board wishes to remind all Budget Committee members, both board members and citizen appointees, that dialogue within our group and with the community should always be constructive and respectful. We hold ourselves to the same high standard that we hold our students, and we expect each individual to conduct themselves with decorum and with a level of professionalism that is appropriate to the important tasks before us. Profanity, personal attacks, or harassment and intimidation of any kind will not be tolerated. The board reserves the right to remove citizen members from committee service and to sanction board members if they are unable to abide by these guidelines. So this will just be, again, our mantra and our marching orders moving forward, that we just keep everything on a very professional level. I also want to make one little tech tip, as I think, even Jacob may have alluded to as well, is if you guys are newer to Zoom, you can mute yourself down at the bottom and then have it always on mute, and then press your space bar and hold that if you're on a computer, and that will open up your mic. It'll be like a talk button. So I would suggest that, for the better, just again, for no stray noises get in, and that just for the good of the order, that we auto mute unless somebody is talking at length. And then, just a little tech tip that I've learned over the last few weeks in using Zoom. It's very helpful because there's always stray stuff going on. There's kids running around, there's dogs barking, whatever. We're operating in a new world here with Zoom. So that's one little tech tip that I'll just advise everybody on, so as to not have any distractions for our meeting. At this point, any questions? All right, good. All right, well, I will move forward then. Next item up on the agenda is to review and approve our meetings for the April 28th Budget Committee. Do I have a motion and a second for that?
Aaron, before you continue, again, I'm getting some questions from the public that they're in the waiting room and still waiting to get into this meeting.
Okay, thanks, Peter.
Dawn or Jenny.
Drew, can you look into that? They're in the waiting room.
Peter, is it Lisa, Dawn, or Jenny?
I honestly, I don't have the names, but I will say I'm assuming one's my spouse, and there might be some others, but they're waiting, and I'm getting those texts. So I can't really go forward here until we resolve that issue. Please.
All right, if somebody starts shouting explicitives, they're going back to the weight room.
That's fine, but we got.
Thanks for your help. I appreciate it.
I've said so.
Drew, it's Lori. Yeah, one of them is Dawn Tacker.
Yeah, they're all in.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm watching that carefully. So if they name themselves, I'll let them in.
Okay, great. I think we have everybody in, and I appreciate you monitoring that, Drew. If there's anybody additional, let's just let everybody in on that. So thank you. So like I mentioned, the next item up is the review and approval of our meeting minutes from the April 28th meeting. Do we have a motion and or a second for that?
Aaron, I approve.
Okay, so
Move, yeah.
moved by Kurt. Do we have a second?
I'll second, Peter.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Any discussion on the minutes? Okay, seeing as we have no discussion, Debbie, do you want to run down the list so we can do the vote like last time?
Yes. Jonathan,
Yay.
Jennifer,
Yay.
Janet,
Yay.
Tom,
Aye.
Lori,
Yay.
Shelley. Thank you. Irv,
Yay.
Aaron,
Yes.
Robin.
Yay.
Jacob's gone. Charles,
Aye.
Nicole,
Yay.
Kurt,
Yes.
and Peter. Thank you.
Yay, aye, yes.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay, great. So moved and passed. All right, the next part is, it says welcome and introductions, but I think we've kind of done that last week a little bit, unless there's some other folks that haven't got a chance to introduce themselves, you know, in our budget committee. But I think we all got acquainted last week. All right, the next thing I'd like to move to is I'm going to give the floor over to Paul Peterson, our superintendent, just to give us an update on the school funding and on some other key parts and information that we've received over the last literally few hours. The one thing as we go into this tonight, and as Paul talks, and as we open up this discussion, the one thing I'm going to remind everybody is a little term: blessed are the flexible. All right. This budget is a moving target. We're getting updates from the state, as Paul will get into. We're budgeting and hoping we've got a good target to go with. But just, I want to caution everybody, this is unlike, and I think many of the longtime board members or even budget committee members can attest to, this is unlike any budget cycle we've ever been through. So I would just caution everybody that this is not, I mean, the proceedings and the procedure are in many ways business as usual, but this isn't business as usual as we've done in the past several years. So just be flexible, and let's just kind of go into everything with an open mind and help, you know, hopefully out of this will come with some great solutions. So Paul, I'll turn the floor over to you, and thanks for giving us all this information tonight.
Thank you for that introduction. So we are going to talk some numbers tonight. We're also going to talk about timeline, because timelines are really driving what we can and cannot do. And as Dr. Fauci says, we don't make the timelines, the virus is making the timelines for us. So as I go through sort of this information kind of dump here over the next 10, 15 minutes or so, I'm going to invite Steve Nielsen to just kind of chime in and add to or correct anything that I put out here. Steve and I have gone through this together, and I really appreciate his acute look at all the numbers and the approach we're taking. So over the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to sort of give you some information that has come out in the last 24 hours. It's going to be some more tough information. I'm going to try and give you a little ray of hope, and I'm going to give you some timeline information. At the end of this, we'll have some question and discussion, and then I'm going to be asking you all as budget committee members to engage in some deliberation, because I'm going to need you to help develop some recommendations for the board on some kind of big ticket items. So with that, I set you up. So now I'm going to deliver some more news. First of all, thing I want to mention is that I'm reading from a document that Debbie is going to send out to you in a PDF. It's just an outline, but you'll have all this too shortly. So a reminder that the proposed budget that we put together and presented on April 28th Remember, that was built on a assumption of the state school funding level of being $9.0 billion. And that's going to be an important number I'm going to ask you to remember. So as you know, the revenue forecast came out yesterday. And so almost everything I'm going to share now is updates as of yesterday, and truly, I'm going to get into some information that came out like in the last 2 hours. So the hot take on yesterday's revenue forecast, if I could summarize it in 30 seconds, is that the revenue forecast for next year is not as dire as we feared it would be for next year. However, it's more dire for the next 4 to 5 years. And that's going to be another important fact that I want you to hold on to, because it's going to inform how we deliberate and talk about some decisions that we have to make. Debbie, can you do a screen share and pull up those two? There's two graphics I want to show everybody that really give a clear picture of the effect of the pandemic on our economy. Right. So you click on that square root recession and recovery, it'll open up a graphic. So you might have heard in years past when we have recessions that sometimes our recessions are a V, that we kind of drop off and then we bounce back. Other times our recessions are more of a U, and the 2007 recession was more of a long U. On this chart, you can see several of the recessions from recent years. There's the 1991, there's a 2001 recession. You see the 2007 recession is a pretty long recovery. And then you see that bright red one. And this is what people are referring to as the square root graph. We had a sharp drop because of the timeline associated with the pandemic and the closures and quarantines and so forth. And then it is expected to bounce back really pretty quickly, but not all the way back to the top. So you can see a nice rebound, and then you're going to see a long, a longer recovery that's going to take probably 4 to 5 years. So that's what we're looking at. So I think that's a good visual to kind of represent where we are today and where we're going to be over the next 4 years. Debbie, can you go to the next graph? And that graph plus this chart that Debbie is pulling up, these are straight out of the revenue forecast that was released yesterday. And Debbie, if you can pull that table back up. Here's another sort of numeric look at the same effect of the pandemic on the economy. And really what I want to call your attention to are the numbers at the bottom in the gold. So for the current biennium, so the 1921 biennium that we're in, we are down $2.7 billion. As of today, they are projecting for the 21-23 biennium that will be down $4.3 billion. And the 23-25 biennium down $3.3 billion. So between now and 2025, you're looking at over $10 billion shortfall. That's what we're up against. What's frightening about that is that we can reasonably state right now that a year from now, as we're planning the 21, 23, 22 school year, there will be no additional money than we have right now. Yet we know we will have roll-up costs. We know PERS is a perennial increase. We have our cost of living adjustments that we have in our contracts, and just the cost of doing business does go up every year. So as we look out the next few years, it doesn't that paints a pretty bleak picture. Steve, anything that I left out on that?
No, that's good.
So Debbie, if you could go back to the outline document, I want to talk about what is comprising today's shortfall. If you recall, on April 28th, I was sharing with you that the governor was proposing 8.5% across the board allotment reductions. And because we were heading into the second year of the biennium, it felt more like 17%. Well, the impact of that at that time was $654 million to the state school fund. And you remember, well, let me go back here. So, as I said earlier, the situation as of today, it's less dire for next year than it was on April 28th. Now what they're saying is that if the governor had to do across the board allotment reductions, it wouldn't be that 8.5% or the 17% for 2 years. It would be more like 4%, about half of that. So the preliminary estimated impact as of today to the state school fund is $308 million. So that's much better than the $654 million impact that I was talking about in April. So that's the first piece of the shortfall. The next piece of the shortfall is that as of about 5 o'clock tonight, we got word that there are $62 million less for the state school fund due to some reductions in the corporate activity tax funding. So there's another $62 million. They're also projecting $120 million is a loss of $120 million is the estimated impact from the loss in lottery revenue. So the total of our shortfall right now are those three things, and that is $490 million is our shortfall as of right now that we know it. There's also another piece, Measure 98 funding, which provides a lot of our funding for our CTE type programs. That is expected to be funded at the 65% level. Again, and that's updated here in the last couple hours. So as I told you back at the end of April, every $100 million in the state school fund, we estimate is about a $620,000 impact to us. So 4.9 actually is so 4.9 representing the 490 million times 620,000. That would be about $3.04 million is our shortfall. So I'm going to stop here. And does that make sense? I'm looking for some head nods. I'm looking for some thumbs up. Do you understand how I got to what our shortfall being is $3 million as of now? Okay, I'm seeing a few head nods.
Paul, is that 3 million shortfall for next year?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
But that's the right question to be asking, because we're doing some things this year that are going to help with that for next year. All right, so I'm gonna keep moving on. So that's our shortfall as of right now, and I think I told you at the end of April that the governor will very likely call the legislature back into special session. In the last 24 hours, I've learned that that's probably not going to happen until probably June 15th or so, if it happens at all. We understand that the governor does have this across-the-board allotment cuts tool that she can use, but it does. I can't imagine the legislature not coming back into session because there's some important decisions that have to be made that only the legislature can make, and that is regarding the rainy day fund and the education stability fund. So if the state were to go ahead and fill the shortfall, they have a couple of tools that they could do it. They can tap into the rainy day fund, and there is, between the rainy day fund and the education stability fund, there is $1.75 billion in those two pots. So there are two paths. So now I'm going to go back to earlier where I started saying, remember how The proposed budget that we delivered on April 20th was based on the 9.0 billion. So now that we have this, we have identified the shortfall. There's two obvious paths for the state to get us back up to that $9.0 billion funding level for states, for the schools. They can tap into the legislature can tap into the reserve, so the 1.75 in the state's rainy day fund and the Ed Stability Fund, or the other thing they can do is they can tap into the student investment account. Remember that the student investment account is a part of the Student Success Act, which is funded by the corporate activity tax. And there's about $296.5 million in that pot to fund the student investment account. So when we get to the question period, someone's going to ask me, well, Paul, what do you think the state's going to do? Are they going to spend all the reserves in the rainy day fund and the education stability fund and not touch the student investment account? Or are they going to wipe out the student investment account and save the rainy day fund and education stability fund reserves? My answer to that is, I don't know, but most of my colleagues and I are thinking that that the legislature will probably tap out the majority of the student investment account funds now and preserve the legislature's ability to tap the rainy day fund and the education stability fund reserves a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 3 years from now, knowing that they have the corporate activity tax will generate money every single year, but it takes a long time to build up the reserves that they have. So that's sort of the murky crystal ball for you. Okay, Steve, did I miss anything?
No, I think you did a great job of laying that out, and that is what remains to be seen at this point, is what what Governor Brown and then potentially the legislature could decide to do, which I think will take a minimum of 2 to 3 weeks, probably longer, to find out exactly what those actions might be and how much they may tap into to the reserves potentially. Sounds like there might be some committee work going on over the next week or two after the holiday, and then possibly the legislators coming back. To go back to our numbers specifically, Paul talked about the $490 million potential hole for the state school fund based on that kind of a across the board kind of reduction piece. That is about a 25% improvement to where we were talking about 3 weeks ago, based on the governor's original statements. So that's great. And then again, that represents about a $3 million hole for us. But I also wanted to mention the action approved by the board last Thursday night to approve the furlough days and the MOUs that we were able to reach agreement in a very collaborative fashion with both the classified and the certified associations, that all employees in the district are taking 5 furlough days between now and the end of the school year. That's saving us about $600,000 that will help increase our projected ending fund balance heading into next year. That'll help us with next year's budget. So that's the same thing as kind of dealing with 100 million of 490 million there. So that really takes our, what I would say, worst case scenario problem for next year from 490 million to 390 million, or about $2.4 million. And then again, as Paul mentioned, we don't know what they're going to do with the SIA piece for that first year. The SIA funding, as Paul mentioned, is now estimated to be $296.5 million for next year, which is a decrease of 37.3% from where they had originally planned for it to be. So there's that, there's the Education Stability Fund, the Rainy Day Fund, and we also don't know exactly how much federal CARES Act money may be coming our way. The original projection they had was around $375,000 for our district, but ODE pulled those draft allocations a couple of weeks ago, and they're having to recalculate that based on some other federal guidance, I guess. So we don't know what that number is either at this point. But those are all pieces that are out of our control as to then what that final number is going to be. And I think what Paul was then going to get into is that because the economic picture for next year wasn't quite as bad as projected a few weeks ago, that there is a pathway to maintain the $9 billion state school fund number. Whether they choose to take that, we just don't know. So that's just kind of, where we're at this point. I really think that, again, the news was better than expected for next year, but the impacts on the 21-23 and the 23-25 bienniums were substantial. And really that's not all that surprising, but just to actually then see a projected number from the state economist. And of course, there's plenty of time for that to change. There's time for the square root to become a little steeper and faster in its rise potentially, but maybe not. You just don't know, and that's where their projections are right now. And I think we have to be very intentional with our mid and long range planning as we budget, how it relates to the services we want to provide, our strategic plan, and making decisions each year, thinking 5+ years ahead. That's a sound strategy either way, regardless of the crisis. But it's going to be even more critical as we go through this recovery period, the next 3 to 5 years.
So anytime we're working on putting together the budget, we have lots of unknowns. That's just the nature of the business. This year, we have even more unknowns. And so if your head is spinning a little bit with some of the numbers and that we're using, I'm about to make it worse, because I want to talk about some of the things that we don't know. And I find myself in the last few weeks saying, I don't know more than I ever have. So, and I'll start with, what is school going to look like next year? I don't know. Nobody does. There is a lot of brainstorming going on around the state, around the country. And there are teams of people in our state who are working right now, and their target is to give us some guidance of how might school be operating and functioning, and they'll give us that on June 8th. I don't expect they're going to give us a very tightly prescribed model of, well, you must do it this way, and kids have to come to school X number of hours. I think they're going to give us some more local control and decisions, but they might have some things like cohorting. We know that social distancing and face coverings are going to be in our future. We just know that. But we don't know how we'll do social distancing on buses yet. Right now, for Metro and Transit, the social distancing rules are 3 foot, not the 6 foot that we're all accustomed to. Please don't ask me to explain. I don't know why it is that way. But how in the world do you do social distancing on a school bus and provide even 3 feet or 6 feet between children? You can go ahead and scroll down a little bit more, Debbie. So since we don't know what school is going to look like, it's hard to create a budget knowing that there's going to be operational and scheduling changes that are flat out going to require different expenditures. So, for example, if we have a hybrid of some kids are coming to school some days of the week, and then other kids come on other days of the week, or maybe we do shifts, so some in the morning, some in the afternoon, and just about anywhere you come up with a hybrid of having fewer kids in the building at a time, yet everybody coming to campus at some time during the week. Any way you slice it, you end up running your buses a lot more. So until we know what that's going to look like, we can't budget our transportation, and that's a significant portion of our budget. We don't know, for example, I mentioned the cohorts. This is an idea that we saw the state and the health department pushing when they were asking us to stand up a daycare. And they said, well, you can have a cohort of kids, say there are 10 kids, and and they have to stay together over time. So if one of those kids leaves, now you have 9. You can't add a different kid into that cohort. And so to keep that cohort of kids together, and I think that looks different at elementary. You might have cohorts that are a few classes in a wing, and those kids all go to lunch on a schedule that helps keep them separate from one another, but also keep them separate from other cohorts and other areas or other wings of the building. Does that make sense? It's hard to wrap your head around, but that's the kind of things that we're going to be looking at. Hybrids of on-campus and at home. We don't know what's going to be required of us and how much more we're going to need to spend on technology. We may be buying another truckload of Chromebooks. We may be trying to get as many hotspots and internet connections for our families as we possibly can. And right now, those are hard to come by. Let's talk about how we run within the buildings. We know that we're going to have increased disinfection and sanitizing. And right now, we might have custodians that disinfect the building once a day in the evening. But if we're running shifts, that means we're going to have to staff up for custodians, and we're going to need to figure out how to find and budget and pay for a whole bunch more cleaning and disinfecting chemicals and resources. So there's so much that is going to be dependent on whatever the design of the school model is going to be. And quite frankly, we're not going to get any guidance on that until June 8th. We won't have information from the legislature until June 15th, and we'll probably spend a whole bunch of time this summer trying to figure out how to implement a different school delivery model. And I'm here to tell you, actually, I'm here to ask you. This is a rhetorical question, but if the virus is still going to be around in mid-August, at what point are parents going to say, "Yeah, I'm ready to send my kid to school"? I believe there's going to be a significant portion of families that say, "Hey, I'm not sending my kid to school. I'm going to homeschool, or I'm going to go with an online cyber school, or I'm just going to do something different." So we don't even know what our enrollment's going to be on day one. We could say right now we've got 3,877 kids, but come August 15th, August 20th, and there's still news about the virus. I think it's reasonable to expect that a lot of families are just going to say, we're going to do something different, and I'm not going to send my kid into the school. How are we going to, here's another rhetorical question. How are we going to respond when regular flu season comes around? We're going to need to have the ability to do some limited shutdowns. A couple superintendents and I were talking here, and we were throwing out some of these rhetorical questions like, all right, we are going to have COVID cases. That will happen next year. So we better start planning right now how we're going to respond. How do we communicate to families? How do we communicate and to staff? And what do we do when we have those cases that get identified in our schools? And what if there's one case? What if there's 2 cases? What if there's 6 cases? At what point do we send a cohort of kids home back into a distance learning model? And at what point do we shut down a whole school? So do you see some of the questions and the things that we're struggling with? So what else?
Paul?
Yeah.
I believe Jonathan has his hand up.
Okay. Question?
Sure. Yeah. My question is for you or Steve, either one. Remind us all when the PERS rates get retabulated or recalculated. They're based on projections, but of course, when the stock market tanks, it doesn't bode well for the future there. So I'm just curious when that recalculates and what you think that'll also do to our future budgeting questions.
Yes, Jonathan, I can answer that question. The rates get reset every 2 years, the odd number years. So the rates that we have this year currently will apply in 2020-21, and that's how we have it budgeted. So the rates will reset on July 1st, 2021 for the 21-22 and the 22-23 school year. The rates for the 21-23 biennium will be based on the 2018 and 2019 calendar year investment performance. And PERS board usually announces those in September of the even numbered year. So we should get those rates at the end of September of this year for the 21-23 biennium. If I recall, both 18 and 19 were pretty good investment years. Don't quote me on the numbers. What I don't know, and I haven't heard any discussion about this yet, but I'm sure we will in the months ahead, is if they're going to try to do some sort of a smoothing effect, take some positive result, some of that positive investment performance, and knowing that 20 and 21 for the 23-25 rates could be rough, maybe they'll try to smooth that a little bit and take a little of the positive from this round, and maybe take that into account for the resetting of the rates coming up. But don't know yet. I'll definitely be keeping my ear to the PERS board meetings on that, and in our business community to see what developments come from that and keep everyone updated.
Thanks, Steve.
Just to kind of, I want to give a couple of concluding thoughts here. So laid out kind of lots of different variables for you, shared with you basically everything that we know right now, and shared with you everything that we don't know. Keeping in mind that, we have timelines. June 8th is when we'll get information from the state on requirements and how we need to be structuring the school when it opens in the fall. And then June 15th is likely when the earliest we'll get any information out of the special legislative session. So with that, we're going to open up here for some questions, because I want to answer your questions, because in a little bit I'm going to ask you to weigh in on some things. I'm going to be asking you, how comfortable are you with spending further into our own district reserves to prop up next year? If we have to have a contingency to cover nearly $3 million, or and as Steve pointed out, it's probably something a little less than that. How comfortable are we going below the 5% reserves? Are we comfortable with 4% in our own reserves? 3%, 2%. I need to hear from budget committee members on that. How comfortable are we with furloughs? There are some people who would go right to furloughs and say, well, gosh, what if we just did, one furlough day a month? Couldn't we balance the budget that way? Furloughs are effective, but I want to give you some of my thoughts on that before I ask you to weigh in on that. And that is, and there's also, staffing levels. We could be reducing some staffing levels over time. And here's a thought for you that I want you to consider. Furloughs are effective. We can save money that way, and we're taking advantage of the work share program right now. Let's assume for a minute that next year the work share program is not available, because we don't know if it's going to be. I have never in my career, and I've been through these budget cuts many times, I have not once seen a school district in the year following a year where they had furloughs say, gosh, remember we have furloughed 5 days last year, so let's add 5 days to our calendar this year. I've never seen that happen. And not only do staff lose out on funds and compensation and furloughs, but students suffer. We already have one of the shortest school years in the country. Kids in Washington, because of their extended, their longer school year, they have almost a year's worth more of education over their K-12 career. So loss of learning is causing harm to our kids and our students in learning. As opposed to when we do make staffing reductions, as awful as that is, and by the way, I will say that all of our personnel in the school district are essential. And that's just not my opinion. That's the definition given to school employees by the Homeland Security Department. We are all essential. There isn't anybody who's doing a job that isn't necessary. But when we do trim our staffing levels, every single time I've seen that happen in the school district, as soon as the money improves in the next year or the 2 years that following, the staffing levels come back up. So that's just something I want you to think about in terms of furloughs, dipping into reserves, and staffing levels and what have you. So I've done a lot of talking. I would like to, at this point, move on to questions and answers. So what questions do you have?
Before, just really quick, we turn it over to Aaron and the rest of the committee. I just wanted to make a note to the committee and to those viewing that there is a link on the board book agenda, on the agenda packet link, straight to the Oregon Economic Analysis Office that contains the full report, yesterday's state quarterly economic report, and there's different layers that you could get into with that. Some people want to see more executive summary, and some people want to dive into the deeper details. The two graphics that Paul pulled and showed you were straight from the slideshow part of the presentation that the state economist put out there. I guess let me share my, oh, I guess I'm not able to share my screen. But if you go to that link and open it, there's a 1.5 page executive summary. There's a link just for the revenue part of the detailed report. There's a link to the slideshow. There's a lot of very good data and analysis that goes into these reports each quarter, and just wanted to make reference to that as well.
Well, thank you, Steve, for pointing that out. We're going to open it up to some questions and thoughts, and just again, this is going to be a little bit more, I think, brainstorming and discussion than maybe we've had in the last few years. But something that Paul said last meeting, I just want to kind of hone in as we discuss and think and brainstorm is, I think coming back to our role as budget committee members is we need to be thinking again on the concept and like kind of theme level, as Paul had mentioned. That our job isn't to go in and say, okay, you need to go cut band, right? That's not our role. That's our administrator's role to look into. What I'm saying is, let's talk about furloughs. Let's talk about staffing levels, and mainly in context of Paul teed this up last time of, okay, if we discuss, we want to change the class size averages, right? And then we trickle that out and allow that to go to the individual facilities to make those decisions. By nature, that probably will affect staffing. So I just want to put that out there for our task at hand, is to really look at those major themes that will impact the high level of the budget, and then also allow our administrators to execute on the granular levels on how to make that happen. So I was putting out I was looking at the chat list and folks who raised their hands. I saw Lori was up, and also Peter. Lori, did you still have wanted to say something? We'll go Lori first, and then Peter.
Yeah, Lori's fine.
I don't see Lori.
Okay,
Lori,
well,
did you
Aaron,
drop off?
I guess I'm confused when you talk about budget cuts and making decisions, and you mentioned things like band. I think when you start labeling things that we can't decide, yet things we can, I don't understand. So what you said there in that message about how we can prioritize things, yet we can't prioritize things with local schools. It was a little tough. So I'm really confused. And Paul, thank you for that, I guess, kind message. But I'm still confused at what are we doing here? What budget are we approving? What are we deciding upon? We haven't seen anything as a budget committee. I haven't seen anything outside of a blanket statement that was a number. And I'm confused as a budget committee member tonight at what we're trying to do. And we start talking about music, Aaron, or arts or local schools. That's awesome, but I'm confused.
So I'm going to turn this over to Paul.
I'd actually like Paul to come in first, Aaron.
Okay, let me take a quick shot if that's okay, Aaron. And let me try and just put it really bluntly. I need the budget committee to stay out of the weeds. I need you to weigh in on the big buckets, the really big buckets of information, like how much reserves should the school board be willing to spend down to? It's the same conversation that the legislature is having. I need you to weigh in on what are your thoughts on furlough days? Is that something that we should be looking at? How many are you comfortable with, and how would you trade those? How would you trade furlough days with having more reserves?
And Paul, thank you, because that's what the honest truth needs to be, and that's what we need to discuss. So I appreciate that, Paul.
You're welcome.
And let me clarify too, Peter, and my apologies if it did not come out that way, but I was trying to, Paul articulated it better than I did, obviously. But that's what my goal was, trying to communicate to all of us tonight, that like Paul said, let's concentrate on the themes. And I did not single out band for any specific reason. It was just the first thing on the top of my head. So I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, and Aaron, I am totally cool, and I am 125% on band, if you know me. But I want to get to the brass tacks, and that's where Paul got. So let's not candy coat it. Let's get down to what we're doing here, and let's start doing what Paul needs, right?
That's what we're doing here. So I'm opening it up to Peter. Thank you for that input. I thought I saw Lori, but McCall, and Jennifer, I just saw you too. So McCall, you had yours up, and then we'll go to Jennifer. Okay.
I wanted to ask a question about classroom size. So if we're looking at classroom size, what do we have currently?
I will do my best to answer that. I have data from the 2018-19 school year. I don't have on hand right now the data for the current school year. By the way, you can go to the Department of Education website, search, and you can find it yourself. So our class size averages in our K-5, and I'm looking for a piece of paper that I wrote that on, was 23 and a half. Okay. In grades 6-8, I believe I had it at about 24, and at the high school level was about 26. When I look at the district as a whole, K-12, our average class size is 25. Okay. Now, please understand, there will be a class of 11 over here and a class of 40 over here. You know, band's a great example where you have 40 kids in there. You might have a special needs classroom with 9 kids. And so that's the role of the administrators and the principals. They've got to balance their class sizes and work in those averages. So that's the best information I have for you right now. And if Jennifer Hannon is on here tonight, she might have some additional information on that. No?
I am here. I don't know that I have anything to add, except that, as everyone knows, our school configurations vary widely, and there are 13 buildings. So those average class sizes really do reflect an overall district average and not what you would necessarily see in your local school building.
Okay. I just wanted to get an idea of what we're working with if we're talking about changing classroom size. Another question or clarification that I had was about furlough days. So you said that there were 5 furlough days approved for this year, and that was about $600,000. So can we assume that about $120,000 a day per furlough day?
Yeah, that's correct, Nicole.
Okay.
That is kind of a net savings per day, and we thought originally 140 to 150,000, but through the work share program, there's a couple things. One is we have to pay the PERS contributions based on their normal wage, so that the employees do not suffer any PERS final 3-year average harm to their PERS calculation. So if somebody's making 1,000 and it gets cut to 800, the PERS contributions are being paid on 1,000, not 800, even though they'd be paid 800. And the other part is there's approximately, I think we ended up finding out there's about 42 employees in the district, or so, 45 actually, that we determined would probably be ineligible for the work share program. And therefore, based on the memorandums of understanding that we agreed to with the associations, if they were ineligible for the work share program, those 45 employees would not be subject to the furlough days. So it brought down the savings per day just a little bit there. The reason for ineligibility has to do with people that may already be retired with PERS and working back part-time. They're not eligible for work share. Employees that have been in the district less than 12 months and are part-time, or employees that have been in the district less than 6 months and are full-time. Those are the 3 primary reasons for people that would be ineligible.
Okay. Do you know if that's going to change drastically over the next year, especially with that the 6-month full-time employees?
You mean the cost of how much we could save per day?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, I would imagine we're going to have less new people in the district because we have a hiring freeze going on right now. So we have some retirements and resignations that we're kind of taking a pause on right now until we know more about what exactly our deficit number is. And so if we were to, if we're going to reduce FTE, hopefully it wouldn't be anything more than saving through attrition and not, having to do layoffs. We just don't know the answer to that yet. But because of that, there's going to be less new people in the district. So yes, I believe you are correct. The number of ineligibles would probably be reduced because people would be here for more than 6 and 12 months.
If I could interject one thing on the furlough, Nicole, is that the work share, if we were to do a more traditional furlough approach, that would be all employees across the district. Those would have to be worked out with both associations. The work share program would allow both associations coming to the table, and there was a group that we decided to hold harmless, if you will, because they didn't qualify. If a more traditional one was it would be everybody.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
But again, those would have to be approved or come to some agreements with both associations on that.
Okay. And then just one last clarification. The reserves are currently at 5%.
You mean our district reserves?
Yeah.
The budget, the proposed budget show ending fund balance to be at 5.5% at the end of next year, which was about 2.5 million at the end of 2021. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. There's a couple of folks stacked up here that I'm trying to monitor the participant list with everybody's hands coming, and I saw some people wave, so bear with me as I'm just trying to write down in order here who's up next. Lori, I saw you put your hand up earlier. I just want to make sure. You did? Are you okay? Do you have a question?
Yeah, I just had a brief question. We're talking about teachers, and if the class size is impacted because of social distancing, how does that impact teacher assistants, the assisting those? Or is that a question saved for another time because of the...
It's a great question. I don't know that we have the answer for it. A lot of times when we are assigning educational assistants to the classroom, it might be because that there's a very large classroom, or there might be some kids who need additional assistance in there. Well, if you're not serving the kids in the classroom, you're serving them somewhere else. So what if some of those kids who need extra assistance are in their home? That doesn't mean we no longer need that educational assistant. It just means their job's going to look different. And I don't know this for certain, but it may be that we have some people who are jumping in their cars and driving to meet kids where they are. I don't know that, but I think that is a possibility worth considering. We do have other programs in our state where we do have home visiting as a regular feature, especially in the early childhood area. And there are some structures that could be adapted to K-12 as well.
So their job descriptions may become very mobilized for them, traveling and possible. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
We may find also that we are having two conversations, not just class size, but maybe caseload. So if a teacher, for example, is serving some students in the classroom, what if they have a bunch of kids who are online? Well, it's kind of class size and caseload, both, right? So we don't quite know how that's going to go, but it seems like an area we need to be looking at over the summer.
Okay, I have a few other folks I saw queued up, so just again bear with me on this. Jennifer, I saw you kind of raised your hand next, so I'll have you go.
Thank you. I figured out the hand raise function now, so I can do it electronically. So my question is kind of goes off of Lori's. A big part of my work is logistics and kids and figuring out where kids go and what groupings there are and how many staff I have to work with. And I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around the logistics that it's going to take to manage the social distancing bit. And so the idea of this group deciding about staffing levels just makes me a little bit uneasy, because I think that there is a lot that is going to have to be worked out by administration in order to figure out what we can actually do, because there are going to be things that nobody's even thought about now that pop up that we're like, oh yeah, we can't do that because of this. So anyway, that's just my first thought. I am happy to take input on that that might better inform my opinion, but that just is a concern that I have.
Thanks, Jennifer. Charles, did I see you have your hand up? I think you're on mute.
No, I'm unmuted.
You're good. Thanks.
I have several questions. Paul, would you review again the date that we expect to receive a budget from the administration?
You're talking about from the state administration?
No, I'm talking about the administration in the school district to the budget committee.
The proposed budget was delivered on April 28th. So you have a proposed budget right now. Is that what you're asking?
But I'm not asked to review the line items in that budget. Those are what you're calling the weeds. And so I'm wanting to know, since you do not know how much revenue we are going to receive and have all of these unknowns that you've outlined, Apparently, you're going to resolve your unknowns and know how much you're going to receive, and that will then trigger a budget that you will draft, as you already have on the assumptions from last year, which are now inaccurate. So we are going to receive a budget, and we're going to be asked to approve that budget. When will we receive the budget asking us for approval?
You have received the budget already, and I am asking for your approval of the budget as it is. You could approve the budget tonight as it is, but I don't think we should go forward without some contingency planning based upon the fact that we are not going to know until late in the summer, late in June, early July, if we're going to have those budget gaps filled. So I want to call attention, and Charles, it's a good question, and I want to call everybody's attention to one of the primary functions of a budget. And that is that it sets the expenditure levels. So almost all the school districts in the state right now are treating their budget as this is the most that we're going to spend, and we're not going to be able to spend any more of that. It's our spending authority. So by approving that, and then the board approving the budget document, it sets our spending authority, and we can't spend any more than that. Granted, if I had you go into the weeds tonight and start going line item through line item, I can't tell you which things are going to be there, and when I say there, in the school programming in the fall, because so much is about to change. It's really a moot point. What we really need is to have the spending authority established, and then give our new superintendent a budget authority where he can then work with administration and work with teacher leadership, then to really define what school looks like in the fall. I do think it would be a good idea, actually, even after the budget is adopted and everything, to reconvene this budget committee, probably in August sometime, and have another conversation about where are we? What does it look like, Mr. Drew? And because there, like I said, there's going to be 11th hour information coming in, even including enrollments. We don't, like I said, there's going to be a significant number of people who choose not to send their child to school, and we're not going to know that until middle of August. So yeah, it's almost not worth getting into the weeds right now.
Well, can I chime in over it, Charles? Can I chime in just a second? I wholeheartedly, Charles, thank you for saying that. I feel that this budget committee is just going to be a push a button and go forward. I feel I don't know what I'm even voting on. I'm not an elected official. I'm appointed. But I feel this is, I'm going forward clueless. And I would actually ask Aaron, our chair, to step in here, because I don't know what we're even trying to do tonight. We've heard some great stories, and they are tragic with our budget. I understand that. And our budget is dismal, but not as bad as we thought it was. We do have reserves, but there has been no solution or any effort. Please, if the school board would back me on this, I would like it. There's been no effort to actually even try to, how do we go forward? Do we have a mission, a statement of outside of saying, you know, students first? I'm with Charles. I feel I am lost as a budget committee member. I am totally lost.
Well, Peter, you asked me to step in, so
I have the floor, Aaron.
Yeah, go for
Charles,
it.
go.
What'd you say, Charles? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I wonder if I still had the floor.
Yeah, Charles,
Yes,
I'm
please
sorry, I cut you off, but please go, Charles.
And can I just say, for a point of order here, just real quick, Charles, and just for everybody, if we can just hold to one person talking at a time. I know might be some frustrations here going on. I totally get it. Peter, I hear you. I think we're all a little frustrated with what we're presented with, but I'm just going to ask everybody, just as a point of order, just to make sure that, either you raise your hand or on your camera, wave at me. I'm doing the best I can to make sure that we hear everybody here. So if we cannot talk over or butt in when other folks are talking, I think it'll just really help our discussions going on. So Charles, you still have the floor. So I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Paul, as I understand, what you're asking us to do is to set limits on major bucket items, not get into the weeds. But in fact, the budget that you say we could approve tonight is moot in and of itself. It's based on an assumption that is invalid and has no bearing, it has no validity in the reality that we face. So Steve is going to have to go back to the drawing board with whatever numbers we are given and craft a new budget. And my original question was, when he does that, when will we get it to approve?
You could approve the budget as it was proposed on April 28th. We could have another meeting and continue the dialogue. What I really need you to do is to help me figure out, how do we move forward with a contingency plan if the legislature doesn't fill the gaps? So how do you feel, Charles? How many furlough days are you comfortable with? And what is your comfort level of going down and spending our reserves? Are you good going down to 4%?
I could comment on that. Perhaps I will over the course of our dialogue. But as I'm reading this conversation from you and with regard to the present responsibilities we have, I could just as easily make a recommendation right now that we spend $40 million on our budget next year, and that is your limit. Figure it out. Furloughs, reserve, anything else that you want to bring back, you figure it out, because you're not asking us to get into the weeds. Now, furloughs and reserves are big bushes in the weeds, but they're not the ultimate ecology that we're working with here. And so tell us how you want us to behave in order to approve what you're doing.
Flexible. Yeah, Charles, I hear you. It is frustrating. And that is...
It's not just frustrating, it's so limiting that I have no role to play except to be able to tell you as a member, okay, here's your budget, buddy. This is your pot. Figure it out. Can I just doing that? State's already doing that for you. So we're going to end up with whatever decisions you make without our input on how you figured it out. And then we're going to say, we approve of what you've done and recommend that to the board for their approval. And all that has to be done by when, what dates. The ultimate budget has to be approved by June 30th. Is that correct? We have one more meeting between this meeting and that time.
That's not necessarily true, Charles. That we're going to look. Can I back up and just answer a couple of things here, just to kind of, again, circle our meeting back here. No one is asking for anybody to vote 5 minutes from now. Okay, we may not have to vote on this until another date in the future, before what we're legally bound to, like Charles had mentioned, by June 30th, right? The reason why we're having this discussion is because we just received these figures yesterday. Charles, you're right. We kind of came in last meeting. It is very, very murky. I felt the same way you did. We came in and we think we had a solid budget based on normal funding, but now we've got a curveball. Now, at that last meeting, we didn't even know what the curveball was, right? We didn't even know if they were throwing a baseball. And so now we had figures that came out yesterday. That's being presented to us by Paul and has been by Paul and Steve. We're talking about scenarios. And the rationale is now we're having the discussion. We're not rushing to approve this at all. But given what we have to budget to something. And in my opinion, this is going to take 1 or 2 more meetings to figure out. We're not going to get this done tonight, okay? But this is where the great ideas come from. And Charles, you had some great input just there a few minutes ago. And that's what we have to focus on. This is the discussion portion. No one person has all the answers. That's why we're all charged to do with this, because we're number one, we're many of us are parents of kids in the district. Number 2, we're a voice of our cohort friends and our families and people in the community. And so that's why the theme discussion is so important right now, to understand what do you feel is comfortable? What are some ideas? If we have to chop, what was it, 2 point some odd or almost $3 million of our budget, where could that come from based on what we're getting? And again, this is a discussion. No one is going to ask you to approve anything. I'm gonna say probably tonight. I don't think it's, I don't know if that's going to happen, because we may not be there yet. So I just want to have make sure we're fostering good discussion to have, and out of that discussion will come ideas on what we can do given our shortfall. Okay. Charles, do you have any more questions?
I'd like to know from Paul if there are other big buckets over and above the reserve and furlough buckets.
Sort of the other kind of the big areas where we could, you get money is by doing like raising class size averages. And if you raise class size averages, that means you're not filling positions, teaching positions, support staff positions also could be impacted by that. One of you asked me a question here in the last day or two, and
is that the only other bucket, Paul?
What's that?
Is that the only other bucket?
Those are the big ones.
I mean, you're asking us to stay out of the weeds and deal with the buckets. I need to know the scope of buckets that you're describing my responsibility for.
Yeah, that's right. Let's also do maybe a little bit of brainstorm. And I was starting to tell a story about somebody asked me a question, and I said, gosh, I don't know, maybe. Somebody asked me, Paul, could we do a 4-day school week? Would that save any money? I've been scratching my head over that, and I posed that to a couple of my staff, and they're scratching their heads going, maybe. What are the pros and cons of that? So what other ideas do you have that are sort of in that 50,000 foot, level of what, big buckets? It doesn't make sense for us to talk about, how much paper is going to buy. The principals, they're going to have to work out how to deal with fewer resources, because we'll have to make some, tightening, supplies budgets. Obviously, we'll have to do that. But where I need your help is, if I'm going to ask the school board to go beyond their comfort zone of 5% in the reserves, I'd kind of like to have the budget committee be in my backing on that, right?
I'd like to try to keep moving on this, just because there's a lot of folks stacked up that I'd like to get to and make sure that everybody gets heard here. Charles, thank you for your input here on this.
Yeah, I'm finished.
And we'll have more time to come back to other folks too. Robin, I saw your hand up a while ago, so I'll have you go next.
Sure, thank you. I just have a couple of clarifying questions. When we're talking about the shortfall that we're going over, does that take into consideration, and it probably doesn't, but I just want to clarify, any of the CDC guidelines that are going to come forward, or any of the plans when it comes to like these extra expenses? Does it include any of those?
No, because we just don't know. And that's
right.
A great question. Like I said, I don't know how much more disinfectant and cleaning supplies that we have to purchase. We haven't put a number to purchasing additional PPE. We know that face coverings, and by the way, we need to start using face coverings instead of masks. There's a reason for that. I haven't put a pencil to creating a budget for PPE because I don't know what's going to be required yet.
And that was sort of my question, because based on site-based budgeting and the enrollment that will affect these schools, I just wanted to know if there was anything kind of set aside if the enrollment goes down for a certain school. Is there anything there that we've even looked at? but it's probably too soon. I just want to clarify that.
It's a great question, though. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Tom, I saw you had your hand up too. Next.
Yeah, got a series of questions. So we have a 5% reserve. How much money is in that reserve? Maybe this is a better question for Steve. So we have a sense of how we have a large hole to fill. So how much money is in that pot or bucket? You know, is it Steve out there?
On attachment 1 of the proposed budget document, the projected beginning fund balance at the time of the proposed budget, or the ending fund balance at the end of this year, I had budgeted $2.8 million. Now that was before the furlough day decision. You know, so that obviously that number hopefully you know will be closer to 3.3, 3.4. But you know, we still have a heavy month of expenses coming up in June with a lot of you know, the balance of contract payrolls and some other things. But we're hoping that number pushes up higher into that range. And then, of course, we had budgeted for, we had budgeted for a 2.8 beginning fund balance to end up being about a 2.5 at the end of next year. So we were within $300,000 of aligning current resources and current expenditures next year. And of course, this was all kind of, you know, pre-COVID. You know, I guess the one remark I just wanted to make, I know you have a couple other questions, Tom, but just kind of with regards to the budget and the process and so forth is, you know, the proposed budget is presented as prescribed by Oregon budget law, defined by the Oregon Department of Revenue, and obviously this process could result in amendments. It doesn't mean that when we make changes that we produce a whole new document every time. If the budget committee makes recommendation for change, I then implement it into the document, and it moves from the proposed column into the approved column and is then presented to the board for consideration in the budget hearing and ultimate adoption. So basically it's a process, just because there's time constraints to be able to make these adjustments, in conversation that results in actual edits to the document that gets presented into the next level. So certainly the budget committee can make changes here. I'll have to say, just from my standpoint, I felt like when we met on the 28th, that the gap was going to be so large that it would make sense to amend, obviously within the document, our revenue projection and whatever expenses we decided to adjust between phase 1 and phase 2. But now, as Superintendent Peterson presented earlier, now that there's a potential pathway still to the $9 billion funding level, again, we don't know if it's going to be there. It could end up being 100 million short or 200 million short. To me, it makes sense to keep the revenue level where it's at, and ultimately the appropriation authority, so that we know we're not going to get more money than that. We could get less, but what if we reduce that budget back and then we get more? We would have to do a resolution to appropriate additional funds if we were to ratchet it back and we got more. So it kind of makes sense to me now that the gap isn't quite as large to stick with what we have. We've already taken actions to save money since the outbreak occurred, the shutdown occurred in mid-March, and now we've had the 5 furlough days. So we've already taken actions to boost our available resources to help us fill the hole next year. And the bottom line is, we are not going to have all the answers before the budget committee needs to approve the budget per state law. I was looking at the calendar today, and the board has until June 30th to adopt the budget, which means that counting backwards, the budget committee would the last possible day the budget committee could approve the budget as proposed or amended would be Wednesday, June 17th. And the reason for that is there's an official budget hearing notice, the one that you always see in the paper with all the numbers on it for all your government agencies, that has to go in the paper at least 5 days before, no less than 5 days before and no more than 30 days prior than the meeting. which means we have to get it to the newspaper by the Thursday before the next Wednesday's publication. And it would have to be at least 5 days before the meeting. So, so the bottom line is, per state law, we have to have a budget approved by the 17th, and we could certainly make whatever adjustments that want to make. Paul mentioned the class size thing, but obviously staff cuts could come in any group: administration, classified, certified. We've already reduced the maintenance budget in this proposed budget by 7 or 8%, and I went into great detail on that in my presentation on the 28th about reducing the number of projects we could do, and we already cut 1 FTE out of that budget. So Charles, with all due respect, I think that this budget committee process, as prescribed in Oregon, the Oregon local budget law manual, is kind of a 2 or 3 month committee process to review the document for accuracy, give input, recommendations to the board. But there's a lot of day-to-day decisions that happen 365 days a year within the confines of this budget structure, because the budget is laid out is never quite what ends up transpiring, but we have to live within our appropriation levels. So anyway, I'm sorry, Tom, I hijacked your question time. Please continue.
No, thank you. That was kind of the us having to have a budget. We're bound by state law. We have to have a budget by June 30th. And thank you for backing that up and explaining that really means that the budget committee has to have something out about 2 weeks before that.
Right.
And we don't have the numbers. Paul did a great job of explaining how many known unknowns are still out there, as far as the governor and the legislature, and then there's the unknown unknowns that we still don't know about. And so I guess I think what Paul's asking is, like with reference to reserve budget size or furlough days or things like that, he just wants to get those questions out and just explain that and see what this is at. That's kind of why I asked that question about the reserve fund. It's a reserve fund, but it's not as big as we certainly would like it to be. And Paul explained very, very well that this is a 4 to 5 year deal. This is not a 1 year bump. This is a long-term thing, a grind that we're going to have to endure. And I don't know. I just, as he was asking about furlough days, and maybe this is a great question for you. When we furlough a person, and there's furlough days versus just letting attrition take hold versus just letting people go. As people retire, maybe you don't rehire for a while. So my question is, when you furlough somebody, there's still some fixed costs. Mm-hmm. So we're still, they're not working, we're not paying their wages, but we are still paying their health insurance and the PERS, I think you explained. And so that's a way to save some money. But if you just don't rehire, if somebody retires and we don't rehire and we let the class sizes bump up a little bit, we save their wages and all those additional costs also. So that's a way to save more money, I guess.
Right.
And I don't know how that's all balanced out.
And you're absolutely right, Tom. And we do have a number of vacant positions in the district right now, and we haven't rehired anything that we don't absolutely have to hire back yet right at this point. Right. And we're waiting to get more information. We're trying to, to get a clearer picture on, what the number is. And
right. I think I'm kind of against. I think of a furloughs as something when you have a one-time bump, and you think that and you're pretty confident that next year things are going to get back to normal, and you want those people back, those same people. Mm-hmm. You don't want to lay anybody off. Right. That type of thing, and that's what a furlough is used for. But this is something we're going to have to endure. We're going to have to accept higher class sizes, and Well, I don't know. That's just what I see, because we
Yeah. Well,
90% of our budget is staffing, roughly.
85 to 90%. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, and that's the thing is, besides trying to figure out exactly, you know, what the exact number is, and knowing what we may need to reduce the FTE to, and hopefully just maybe saving through attrition, and then ultimately maybe being able to rehire some of those back, at least in time, is, you know, Paul brought this up earlier. We really do not know what the impact of this is on our enrollment going into next year. Silver Falls has been blessed to be, at the worst, a stable enrollment district, and most years growing by 0.5 to 1%. Many districts in the state often are in declining enrollment environment, and this district has not had that. But because of this virus, all 197 school districts in the state may have some issue with that, and so that would impact our revenue even more. That's certainly not something we're going to know before the budget committee has to approve a budget.
Right.
One of about 20 things. I mean, there's a lot of things there. So that's just that's a whole nother thing.
That's something I never even thought about was people just not wanting to put their kids in school.
Which is a whole nother reason we need to wait on making rehire decisions, because that whole part could come into play as well.
I got one more comment, then I'll let someone else take the floor. We want as many we're here for the students, we're here for the kids. My wife's a teacher in the district, and I've observed her interacting with kids over Zoom, and some of the kids have a hard time at home. Not terrible. Maybe they want to get back to school. It's pretty chaotic at home. Their school is a stabilizing influence for them. And so we need to be maximizing the amount of days that the kids are in the classroom next year. And that's what we need to focus on. And I know that sometimes we can use furlough days to keep our staffing levels up, more people employed, but we're not here to employ. We're here to teach kids. And I'll let someone else have the floor.
Thanks, Tom. Next, I got Jonathan. I know you wanted to say something.
Yeah, thanks. I've had a number of thoughts, and some of them maybe been answered or already said. I'll try to keep it brief. One of the things that occurs to me based on Paul and Steve's discussion is spending down the reserve beyond where we're at doesn't feel particularly safe to me. Maybe we could dip in a little bit, but it's not huge to begin with. So I think we need to look at broadly other buckets, especially if next year is liable to be in as bad a shape as this year and the year following, things like that. We may need to peanut butter that reserve out a little ways if that's possible. The other thing, there was some discussion about class sizes, right? That's a really challenging thing. I think Jen Hannon mentioned that briefly. We've got a lot of schools where they're just the configuration, there's one class per grade level, right? In a lot of them. I mean, you can't just say, well, I'm going to go from 22 to 23 or 25 to 27 kids per grade, because unlike a large elementary school in a large city where you may have, 15 first grade teachers, right? I mean, you can't just go down to 14 or 13. It just doesn't work that way. So I think class sizes is a challenge. And that leaves us with attrition and or staff reduction and furlough days. And between them all, I'm just going to second what Tom said. I thought it was well said. I don't need to add to it. I think we're here to teach kids, and we need to focus on that. So thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Next up, Peter, I saw you had your hand up again.
Yes, Aaron, thank you. I just wanted to remind you that we do have 90 participants on this Zoom meeting. So I would like to open up the forum if any of those folks would like to chime in and make public comment. I don't want to make it like a free-for-all, but we talked about that, right?
Yeah, Peter, there is a spot after our own committee gets through some of the ideas and questions and thoughts. there is a spot for public comment before the meeting is over tonight.
And we seem to be having more of a discussion than a policy development. And I'd like personally at this point to have the public, if they want to come in, I welcome them, but it's up to you.
I do too, and again, I think we have a space for that. There's a few other folks that have had their hand up that are on the committee that I'd like to have them weigh in first. And when we have our discussion as the committee complete, I'll gladly take any and all public comment on what's been discussed.
That's why my hand was up. Thank you, Aaron.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer, I saw you had your hand up again too.
Thank you. I just wanted to chime in and say that what Steve, he didn't necessarily propose it, but Steve's idea of explaining that we could adopt a budget that was created and make adjustments to it as we go.
Hopefully didn't lose Jennifer there.
Maybe explore that opportunity as we go, and then if we can have a focused discussion on the reserve level, I think that would be a good topic to talk about as well.
Jennifer, a technical challenge. We lost a good part of what you said. I'm sorry. If you don't mind reiterating, we want to hear what you had to say on that. It cut out a big portion of that.
Sorry. Probably my Wi-Fi. So I just wanted to say that I did, it does, what Steve describes about adopting the budget that's been presented makes a lot of sense to me, and then making adjustments as we go. I am open to other viewpoints because, you know, my mind can certainly be changed, but that just makes a lot of sense to me, especially since that level of funding was an adequate level of funding, and anything that we have from here on out is inadequate. We're going to have to deal with it, but it just it makes sense to me that we start at the proposed budget and then make changes as we go. And then I also wanted to just suggest maybe a focused discussion on reserves. I'd be really interested in hearing from the committee on what they feel about the reserve level. I know Jonathan chimed in. I'm wondering about specific levels though from the whole group. Thank you.
Yeah, Jennifer, some really good points. I'm going to piggyback on that because that's where my mind has been going to with a lot of this, because I see we almost have this, we have a Y here, right? We don't have a normal budget where we kind of linearly approve it. We've got two different options that could be before us. We've got our budget as is, which to your point was adequate. It left 5.5% in reserves at the end of the year. I would gladly entertain any discussions on some of the details or some of the line items that, you know, if there's an exception to any of the items that were presented in that budget as is at our last meeting. I think we could totally have a discussion on that if there's anything glaring that people have some objection or have some questions on. I think that's healthy and good. But then I also see another path of, okay, if our figure is roughly, I think the figure was 3 million potential impact-ish to or just under that to Silver Falls School District. If we have to approve a budget like that, which again, we may have to come back this summer to discuss that, where are the areas in that we feel comfortable with making adjustments? And you brought up another great point, was with reserves, and I think that's a good starting point. I'm also hearing, you know, from Tom and from other folks that, you know, we're here for the kids, number one, and that has to be the guiding beacon of everything we do here. So I just wanted to explain. I think we might want to think it as two different budgets, right? We've got as is. If there's no problems with that, or if there are some problems with that, I think we need to talk about it. And then what is the budget that could be based on the cuts that we think we know are coming. Nicole, I saw you had your hand up too.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, in thinking about class sizes, what kind of cost savings can we expect from increasing class sizes? Can we expect a savings per student, or maybe by 5 students, or what are we looking at?
Great question. I don't really have those numbers right now. I think it takes the form of if we had a loss of maybe, and again, I'm just going to pull an arbitrary number. It doesn't really mean anything. If we had 3 less teachers in K-5 across the district, I need to do the math still and figure out what does that do to average class size in K-5. It's going to increase it. I just don't know if that increases it by 0.5 or 1 student, but that's sort of the mathematical, and that's the work we're just now starting to consider. Like
Nicole, did you have any other questions, or did that answer your question?
No, I didn't have any other questions.
Okay, thanks. Lori, I saw your hand go up.
Thank you. This question may be directed to Steve. I was wondering, is there some way, I always like to have little scenarios where I know how much money is saved if we did this as opposed to that. It might be also helpful for the budget committee. That I know this is just, there's so much gray right now. We don't know what the future is going to hold, but is it possible to look at what would it look like if we took the reserves to just 5% as opposed to 5.5? Now I'm just throwing out ideas, Steve. I'm not, you know.
That's great, Lori. Yeah, you know, I think, what is it? Every 1% is based on our current level of expenditures. About every 1% is, I think it's 460,000. So if we, you know, took another 0.5% off of there, you know, you'd be looking at another $230,000 in resources that could go, you know, to help towards next year if we chose to do that.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious how that looked when we look at the breakdown. And also, I know that the children are most important, and yet I think about the social distancing. Do we have any concepts of if we increase class size, could it be offset by a hybrid approach? Something I'm a little bit more familiar with. But I don't know if there are scenarios that might also help. By hybrid, I mean partially online and partially in person, and sort of breaking up the week that way. I don't know, maybe Mr. Peterson has some thoughts about that, but I don't know. I do a little better, I guess, conceptually with money issues, with potentially different scenarios. I do agree with our chair that we probably will have to have other meetings with our budget committee on this as this evolves, if you will.
Yeah.
So, thank you. If you could answer.
Thank you.
I'll try and answer. Let's see. I think, Lori, you're really asking the right question. And I don't know the answer, but I think that's where we need to do some more homework. I'm taking away from this conversation that I need to go start doing a little bit more math on average class sizes and what does a hybrid, what opportunities does it create? Does that mean a teacher who's accustomed to having 25 kids, can that teacher now take 30 kids because 10 of them are online? I don't know the answer to that question. I suspect when I go and ask that question of our teachers, they're going to go, whoa, this teaching online thing is a lot of work, and please don't give me 40 kids just because 20 of them are online and 20 of them are in person. I really don't expect that we're going to be able to now suddenly have caseloads of 100, 180 kids online for a 4th grade teacher. We're not headed down that direction, but I think we do need to figure out some potential models and be able to give you some answers to that question and And Nicole asked the right question too of, you know, what does it mean if we went from average class size of 23 to 24? How many teachers is that? How much money does that save? I don't have those answers for you tonight, but we'll go to work on those.
Yes, because I was thinking with hybrid, that's probably where a teacher assistant can be extremely helpful if they're managing online and other, but then again, I'll refrain. I don't want to get into too many details that aren't my area. So, but anyway, thank you for answering that.
I'm going to come back to the original budget because again, I think we have two different scenarios here. One needs some more questions answered as we've been talking and brainstorming here tonight. The other one seemed pretty sound. I want to bring it back to what we were presented with on the 28th. Is there any, does anybody, as they look through the budget documents, see anything glaring there? Does anybody have any issues with what was presented there? I'd like to have a little discussion on that to know that we probably need to use that as a placeholder. But going back to that, what input do we have on the existing budget that we were presented? Give everybody time to raise their hand if they'd like.
I've raised my hand twice. Should I just speak?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you on my screen, Charles. Go for it. Thanks.
I have made a line-by-line examination of that budget. I probably have 55 questions, and they're all in the weeds. And I have also reviewed all of the profiles of each school. I have questions on each school within their proposed site-based budgets. Another 30 or so questions, also in the weeds. So I'm frustrated by this very process. I spent a lot of time as a budget committee member looking at the budget that was presented to us. On the 28th, we established that budget probably doesn't have a lot of merit because we don't know what the revenues are going to be for the district. Tonight, when I raise that same subject, the superintendent tells me that we, as a budget committee, could adopt that budget and go forward. Frankly, the whole process just is so convoluted and so frustrating and so meaningless for an individual member to have input that I just throw my hands up and say, what the hell? Just tell me how much we want to spend on the budget, give that number to the administration, tell them to fit the budget, fit the program into that budget frame and go forward. I don't know what else to do. Having a discussion about furloughs, having a discussion about reserves, having a conversation about whether we have a 4-day week or a 5-day week, all of those questions, are they big budget items? Are they the only big? Is transportation in the mix? Are school closures or consolidations in the mix? If we have lower enrollment in a school that has 76 students and it can, works down to say 45 students, should we be considering merging that school with one of the other schools that has 75 students? Would the parents agree to that? Haven't been willing so far. Why should the budget committee take that up? It's a third rail in this district. And in the meantime, we sit all year long as a budget committee with other budget items coming forward, like the consideration of whether we should rewrite the bond to get a lower interest rate. That doesn't come to the budget committee. If some upset comes in the middle of the school year and the budget has to be amended or is amended, that doesn't come to the budget committee. But we sit as budget committee members purportedly to be responsible for approving a budget ongoing in this district. And I'm offended by the decision to give that credit to the budget committee. It does nothing.
Thank you for your input, Charles. I appreciate
and I
that.
would like to say, with regard to this budget, you want to cut money, well, give up the COLA this year, the COLA allocation. Cut the administrative staff. But that's probably in the weeds, so I'm not allowed to do that, or at least I'm not going to be responsible for that. I mean, where do we want to go as responsible citizens sitting in this position to help this district work with its problem? Where do we want to go with that, and how willing are they to open themselves to public consideration?
Charles, I understand your frustration. I appreciate your input. I understand, your frustration. I think at the beginning of the meeting, I said that I think we're all at a point where we're budgeting to some unknowns, where we've got a lot of things going on. It causes some frustration. So I hear you. I just would like us to all keep that in mind. We're doing our best here.
When you asked me the question, do I have any thoughts about the budget that was presented to us on the 28th? Yes, I have a lot to say about that budget, but I'm not allowed to say it because it's in the weeds.
I don't think we said you're not allowed to say that. We were talking about other things going on with the shortfall. If folks are willing, I would be willing to entertain if somebody would like to have some discussion on the existing budget. Again, we have to have something, hopefully as a placeholder, and another one that we need some more input on. But if that's something that wants to go on, I'd be willing to it. I do have some hands up that I want to get to before we get to that. Jonathan, I saw your hand up first, and then Tom, I saw yours next, and then Peter third.
Sure. Yeah. Again, I'll be brief. It was just kind of a response to Charles's question. I don't think it's not out of bounds to make suggestions, right? I mean, you listed a couple of things that were pretty broad. COLA. Well, of course, that's driven by contract, but nonetheless, it's a pretty big bucket item, right? It's not like you're specifically saying that we should eliminate some specific position. You mentioned, the administrative. Well, again, if you've got a specific sort of big bucket item, mention it. I think the weeds part is that we're not going to get into the day-to-day discussions that Steve and the rest of the administration is going to have to make regarding the sort of reaction to what takes place. We don't know who's going to, leave the district for some reason, right? That's going to cause cascading effects, ripple effects that, we just aren't going to be in that position to figure that stuff out. So as long as I think you stay above the fray and at the big sort of broader stroke items, I think it's fair game. Again, I'll stop there. I just wanted to respond.
Thanks, Jonathan. Tom.
Yeah, I'll kind of, I hear Charles's frustration and to some extent Peter's. They're wanting to look at some details, but we don't have them. I mean, we're just not going to have them. And I think what Paul's asking, and I think that, and I guess what I'm asking too, I agree, is that we have talented staff all across this district. And they do it every day. They know their craft. We just got a report as a board about the achievement levels of our special education department and the IEP kids. It was amazing. I mean, they knocked it out of the park again. We have talent. We have teachers who are here, I think, about a 90% retention rate. I think the administrators are the same thing. These people know what they're doing, and they do a pretty good job. It's not like they don't make mistakes. And I'd like to give them the grace to, we can make them jump through a bunch of hoops and run a bunch of numbers based on some guesses and have them formulate a new budget. But you know what? In a month and a half, it's going to change again, and then they're going to have to redo the work. I think kind of what is being asked is that we just approve the budget as it is, knowing it's going to be changed in August. And just that's what's going to happen. That's what's in front of us. And they're going to make those changes based upon the money that comes and the requirements of dealing with this pandemic. And we have to give them the grace to move fast, because they can receive data on a Monday morning and start working on it at 10:30 that same day. And the idea that we're going to get a big budget committee together and work through all those details. And none of us are experts in a school district budget the way these people are. And they do a darned good job. They're not perfect. I'm not perfect, but they do a darn good job. And I like to give them the grace and approve this budget as quickly as people are comfortable, and then let them make the changes as they see fit going forward, and make our job as easier as I want to make their job as easy as it can be, because they're working on reduced staffing, because money's tight, staffing's tight. So I'll get off my soapbox. All right, thank you.
Peter, I had you next.
Yeah, I just want to kind of, I guess take on what, Tommy said. These teachers, budget cuts are tight. So what do? You cut them. I really just think we need to bounce back to where we're at with this discussion. It's about the budget. And have we been presented a budget? And Charles said it very well. I don't see the budget. I guess we approve it, but I don't see it. I don't see anything in the text that comes from the emails through the social media. I don't. And I'd like, again, to defer to Charles to say, where is the budget that we're approving outside of just a blanket statement? Anyways, it's kind of a diatribe, but I think it's important.
Thanks, Peter. Robin, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think you are giving us the budget that you can, and I appreciate that. I know it's a lot of work that goes into it, and it's a lot of time. You sort of asked for opinions on what our preference is, and I appreciate that. Personally, I like the idea of lowering the reserves a little bit, doing some sort of hybrid, talking with your principals and finding out what they like to do with their staff and how that looks for each school. I think that's super important. So I think going back to what Tom said, I think it really does go back to those people. They know what they're doing, and it's really important to go back and get their opinions.
Great, Robin, thanks for that. So if I'm hearing for some folks, again, I'm hearing we don't feel like we're prepared, which I agree with, but we'd also like to see a tentative budget now having some figures that we got, at least as a placeholder, what a reduced budget would look like. And I think we've heard a couple of different themes tonight. We've heard, what would it look like by reducing the reserves by a certain percentage level? I think we've heard potentially class sizes. What would that do? Paul, I know you said you didn't have an answer for us, but you could get that, and that might be a good one to include. And then we also, the furlough discussion has always comes up because we kind of have a figure on that. And Steve, correct me, is it 150 or 120 per day that the furloughs could save?
Yes, under the work-share program, for these 5 days, we saved $120,000 net per day. Yeah.
So do we look at a hybrid approach using at least those three themes for a new budget that maybe we could come back next week? Or I don't know what the time frame, Paul, I'm not going to put you under the gun because I'd like you guys to weigh in on this, but maybe we come up with a new budget that, again, that with some of the input you've heard tonight, and I'd like to hear more from the public too, or even from some of the budget committee members on what other themes can we look at? Where are we comfortable reducing? And then having a new budget presented to us, giving us time to review. And then we can reconvene in the next week, maybe even two, to see what that looks like, to weigh in on it, and to feel comfortable with a good budget moving forward. Now, we could also put an asterisk by it that we may have to come back in July and August if there are some reductions, additions, or we can maybe say, hey, we're doing it, with this $3 million reduction. Well, maybe in July after the legislature meets, it's only 1.5 million. We could also make a list on if we get that contingency back, what are we going to add back in? We could already have that as a placeholder as well. Some options I wanted to throw out there. Paul, I don't know if that's something you wanted to weigh in on first, to maybe see if that's something that we could do.
Yeah, absolutely. We could have another meeting. I could provide some more answers to these kinds of questions. And another thing we could do, we had the coffee talk Q&A times, and those seemed to go pretty well. And the people who came in had questions. Charles didn't show up with his, what you got, what, 50-some questions, Charles? We could do some more of that, and that might give Charles and others who have questions some more opportunity to get answers to some of those specific questions. I'd be happy to do another one of those or two of those kind of coffee talk where we really do get into some very specific types of questions. And yeah, I'm completely open to both of those things.
I think it would be good, though, to maybe take some of these themes and redo the budget with our administrators, and then have something presented to us here in the next week or so. And again, here in a little bit, we can set a time and date of when that would be rational to have another meeting. But I think that would be probably the most prudent thing to do as this committee. That way we have something that's more of an actual document that could be a great working document that we would feel comfortable with improving, knowing that it might even improve and be better. But I think your team, as is Tom and John and some of the others echoed, your team is best at, if we give themes, where can the actual granularity come in, and where can those reductions be made?
I want to be sensitive to the amount of work it takes to put together an entire document. And as I'm saying this, I'm looking at Steve here in my gallery view. And I am wondering if rather than produce an entire whole new budget document that's that thick, we could explore some of these avenues and kind of come back to you with maybe a one-pager of, here are some potential changes that would be embedded into the larger document. It does take quite a bit of effort to recreate the entire budget document, and I would like to ask Steve to kind of weigh in on this. What would be a good way to consider some of these alternatives and put some numbers to it, and sufficient for a conversation?
Really, I think it would just be a 1 or 2 page summation of proposed changes or different scenarios that could be reconciled to kind of the original kind of high level version of the budget in attachment 1. That would be probably the most reasonable way to be able to present in an understandable way and in a timely fashion. I know that our next meeting isn't scheduled it's scheduled in 6 days. And with a furlough day and a holiday, I don't see something like that coming together for next week. But it's certainly something that can be done for sure.
Yeah, I think it's something that you'd be comfortable with. But I think from hearing you right, Steve, it'd be almost like an addendum, memo or list of, okay, based on here's our current, here's the adjustments to certain line items and/or line items in the budget where we're going to make the reductions based on the input from what you've heard in themes tonight, and then also input from the administrators. I think that would be quite fair. I also want to talk about giving these folks enough time to do that. If we look at the calendar, and pardon me while I do, the next meeting, like you said, could be, if we wanted to next week, if we did something, maybe that first week of June, even moving, if we had to like a Tuesday, that, like the 2nd, maybe that would bring it up. That way we could even squeeze another meeting in, potentially, I'm just talking out loud here, before the next board meeting, which is on the 8th. So does that, let me throw that out there for discussion or thoughts on that. Does that sound reasonable and rational?
I think we need at least 2 more meetings.
Fair enough.
And I think that an update from the budget presented to us on the 28th with suggestions on how we fit it to the projected revenues from the administrative staff would be helpful. And I don't know if they're willing to issue a letter to all of the individual schools asking them to cut their budgets 10% or some amount and incorporate that, the feedback from that into the equation.
Thank you, Charles. So I want to get back to some of the themes that we can give back to our administration to go to work with as we move to the next steps. We've heard furloughs, we've heard reserves, we've heard class sizes. Is there any other themes that you folks are thinking of? Then we can even open it up for the public here in a little bit as well. But at least from the budget committee members, what other themes do we want our administration to look at to potentially reduce? I want to make sure.
Aaron.
And Aaron?
Yeah, I got you, McCall. Yeah.
Yeah,
hold
one
on
thing
just a second. McCall, Paul had a little correction. I'm going to get to you next.
Sure.
Let me go to Paul real quick. Go ahead, Paul.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Shelley Neelan would like to suggest that we let the public be allowed to speak before we decide on the list of themes. That's from Shelley.
Very fair enough, Shelley. I agree with you 100%. And I was going to get to the couple. I have the little chat box pulled up, or the raise hand box pulled up, and there's a couple of members' names popped up, and then we'll go to the public for sure. So thank you for that. Agreed, 100%. McCall, go ahead. We'll go McCall and then Robin.
Yeah, so one thing that we haven't brought up that would not affect classroom size is making cuts to admin. I think that's definitely something that we should also look at doing. It would not affect the class sizes directly.
Fair enough. It's another good discussion part to discuss. Robin, I saw you next.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as we're going through a timeline, to just keep in mind that week that you have like high school graduation and all the other schools and everything that they have going on. So as you want administrators to weigh in on their opinions, that timeline might be a little difficult too.
Yeah, and I'm concerned though that if we try to do it next week, are we going to have enough time as well? The next viable day might be like June 2nd, but we're not pushing it towards the end of that week where we could get into graduations. It would give them a few days cushion before then. Because I think in the next, that would give, about 10 days to give some feedback with the administrators or with our administrators, and then the rest of like Paul and his immediate team and Steve could craft something and have something to us on the 2nd. And then if we had to do, as Charles had mentioned, maybe another meeting, we could even squeeze it in on the 4th if we need to before that board meeting. And again, I'm not trying to say we have to, but it probably would be prudent to try to get something to the board for review and approval on June 8th. We're going to start losing staff and things with getting into mid-June. And that could be tough. So again, I'm not trying to say we have to be under the gun to get it done by June 8th but I think it would be prudent to aim for June 8th to get it approved to get it to our board for review and for approval.
Yeah. June 4th is graduation, by the way.
Thank you. Well, again, these are, I will caution, these are special circumstances, but we can work through this around the different schedules, especially with the advent of Zoom. It's maybe a little easier than getting in person. So, so again, furloughs, themes that I'm capturing here: furloughs, reserves, class sizes, administration. Anybody else have another theme idea to go down and look at? Tom.
Flexibility. Grace. give the people preparing these budgets and having to operate these things flexibility and grace. Thank you.
Good point. Thank you, Tom. Peter, I saw your hand up. I didn't know if that was carryover from before, but I see your hand up.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Aaron, I saw Janet's hand go up.
Oh, Janet, I'm sorry I missed you. You're off my screen there. I was looking at the participant box here. Janet, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. I would like, I don't anticipate that the number would end up being very large, but it would be interesting to see what would happen if we just took a pause on COLAs for the year across the board and see what effect that might have. I was also going to make a quick, am I muted? No, a quick comment that I don't have a crystal ball more than anyone else does, but I think it's probably safe to assume that the legislature or the governor, well, the legislator, I should say, will shore up some portion of the $3 million gap that we're seeing anyway. I think that's, you know, even if it's just a diversion of SIA funds. So I'm optimistic that that the whole won't be this bad, but I think it's really smart to prepare and to give our team the tools that they need to make the decisions they need to make when the time comes. So, all right, thank you.
Thanks, Janet. Any other comments from the committee here? I'm seeing, so again, here's to recap: furloughs, tapping into reserves, changing class sizes, administrative decreases, pausing on COLAs. Any other themes? Okay. And then, and like Janet had mentioned too, I think hopefully that $3 million won't be the actual. Hopefully it'll be much less, and we'll be in a better spot with some diversion of funds. But I think one thing that might be prudent too is, again, you know, as the team develops it, they'll have a contingency list as well, saying, okay, we're budgeting it at the $3 million reduction, but if it ends up being $1.5 million, we'll be able to we'll do this. So Paul, that might be something to consider as you move forward with staff to craft this amended budget.
Yeah, and I hope you're okay if I don't ask our business and fiscal department to regenerate the entire document with these things. I think what we'll do, like Steve suggested, is kind of give a 1 or 2 pager summation of some of these possibilities.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's almost like an appendix to the budget, or yeah, as an amendment to the budget. I think that's fair. Okay. All right. I think we've got a lot of good discussion here tonight. I know it's and again, interesting times. So I do, as many of the members here have suggested, and as is on our agenda, I would like to open this for some public comment. Is Drew still on? Drew, I see on there, is there anything special we need to do for public comment?
Nope. People have the ability to unmute themselves and unmute their camera if they wish.
Okay. All right. Here's a point of order. I'm going to ask for folks if you'd like to weigh in tonight. If you click on the participants button, you'll see a list of all the participants. There's a little blue raise hand, and that will allow me to scan this list and see that you have your hand up. So if you could do that, and again, I'll give some time and pauses for things. If I do miss you at the end, there's some reason you can't get that going, you know, I'll have you just say, hey, I'd like to say something, no problem. But at first, if we can try to use the hand raise feature, that would be really, really helpful to keep the order here tonight. So I'll give a few moments for our folks here in the public to raise their hand. Again, you hit the participants little button at the bottom of your screen, and then the blue raise hand on the bottom left side. All right, Sarah Weitzman, I have you on first.
Thanks, Erin. This is Sarah Weitzman. Appreciate all of your time tonight. I just wanted to make a few observations. And I know that we're in a difficult time, but what was frustrating to me for this budget season was that at the last budget meeting, it was not made clear that the budget that was presented on board book was what you guys were going to be asked to be approving. And I think that's where probably I feel that some of your budget committee members are frustrated because, one, there hasn't really been any principal presentations. We haven't heard from our admin. There was a lot of information uploaded to board book after that meeting. And so, like we've done in the past, there has not been the opportunity to ask about certain line items. And I understand that that might be something that isn't wanted this particular year because of the unknowns, but it is still something that I feel as a community, we should be able to be asking these types of questions. And so I feel as a community member that you should be allowing your budget committee members to ask whatever they want about line items. Also, I agree with what Janet said. I feel like we should look at freezing that 2% COLA for administration. And I don't think that just because you have that as a contract, that's not a possibility. And I also feel that I've worked under contract and not under contract as a nurse. And in the hospital system, we always furlough our admin, our administration first. And they usually have the means to be furloughed. They are not, in a school setting, not giving direct teaching to our kids. And so I think that's something that we should look at. Additionally, I think that it would be a real disservice to our teachers to increase class sizes, especially with what they've been fighting so hard with Red for Ed and for their contract recently. And I would not want my child in a class more than 25. So I think that the last thing I wanted to say was that this year compared to last, the school board didn't have any specific goals for the budget either. And so I think that just in general, this tonight has been super confusing and frustrating, and it seems like a lot of people feel that way. And so I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Michelle Stadley.
Thanks, Erin. So I'm hearing a lot of interesting things tonight. I don't understand. Sorry, Siri's talking to me. She thinks I'm talking to her. So I think all of our teachers will agree with the theme of we're here for the kids. However, I'd like to make it very clear to everyone present, including the numerous teachers listening in on tonight's meeting, that when we hear a board member say, we're not here to employ, we're here to teach kids, that statement feels incredibly disingenuous. In case anyone is unsure, teachers teach kids. So when you're talking about larger class sizes, you are in fact talking about cutting teachers. If teachers teach kids, it stands to reason that cutting teachers should be the last possible resort. You can't have it both ways. You can't say we're here for the kids and then throw them into a class of 35 or more. As a teacher who had a class last year of 33 and a class of 15, I can guarantee that the kids in my class of 15 received a better education than the ones in the larger class. It's easy to sit in that chair and discuss class size as a number. You are not the ones who are in those classrooms teaching those kids. The same board member who said we're not here to employ, we're here to teach kids, also said we have a talented staff who do it every day and know their craft. We do, you're right. But the burden of all of your decisions fall on us. Please understand that when you give us compliments like that, and then make reducing teachers one of the first go-to options, your compliments are empty and unappreciated. Teachers are constantly asked to adapt. We're good at it. We jumped into distance learning and made it workable in mere days. But there's a reason we have a 50% burnout rate among teachers. I know tough decisions have to be made, but you're talking about people's lives with some of the most callous language I've heard in a long time. And I need you to know that it isn't going unnoticed. Please take the time to look past the easy cuts to actually do what's best for kids.
Thank you, Michelle. Sherry Thompson.
Hi, I am a teacher in the district, and I normally don't speak at things like this, but I just had something. I'd read an article recently about some other states around the country and what they're doing, and I hadn't heard it mentioned as a possible solution. And I know this solution actually came up, I think it was in 2008, when we had some pretty big budget cuts. And it was a talk of going to a shortened school week. So you'd have a little bit longer days, but you'd have like a 4-day week. And when we're talking about $3 million, that's a lot of money to cut to a school budget. And I don't know if anyone has really looked into that option. Obviously, it would mean probably a cut in pay for teachers. But again, that would be also, you know, a day that they wouldn't be working. They could, you know, if they needed to work another job, or, you know, that would be a whole extra day they would have in their week. The other thing I've just been hearing around the country too is that school districts are looking at going to a different type of schedule. I mean, there's really not a whole lot of reason that we have the summers off anymore. You know, that was kind of set up years ago for agriculture reasons. And, you know, if there's any talk about even looking at changing kind of our school structure, especially if we're going to use furlough days. You know, summer is a big loss to kids. You know, they're not in school. That's a big time they're missing out. And especially if we're looking at furlough days, you know, maybe looking at adjusting our school calendar and what that looks like for kids. So those are just a couple ideas I hadn't heard talked about. So just thought I'd throw them out there.
Sherry, thanks for that. That, you know, if anybody doesn't have a problem with me kind of asking to add this to the list, I think that was a good point that Sherry brought up about, you know, what would changes to our school schedule do? Is there some potential cost savings there to help us through this as well? So I think that's a great point, and Paul, I'll kind of add that to the list as well, if everybody's okay with that. I don't want to speak for the whole committee here, but it's a very good point. Tom.
I saw a bunch of people with their hands still up, so I wasn't expecting. I'll respond to Michelle. That my comment was in reference to furlough days, and perhaps I didn't make it clear as I was talking to Steve Nielsen. There's an overhead cost for having furlough days. So even though someone's on furlough, they're not working, there's still an overhead cost. And so furlough is what you do to preserve employment because you think you're going to need them next year. And that's what that comment referred to. And because this looks like a long-term thing, I think furlough days is not the way to go. And just sadly, I mean, I agree. I mean, like Michelle, you know, my wife is a teacher in this district. I see her do it every day. And I'm going to push back here a little bit. You took a shot at me, but there was 2 budget committee members. One of them's even a board member who referred to rolling back the COLA for this year, and you didn't push back on them. So I assume is that on the table for a bucket to dip into? Thank you.
Do you want me to respond to that?
I would like you to respond to those 2 members of the budget committee that referred to rolling back the COLA for next year, and not me, because I didn't say it.
Well, I didn't respond to that, Tom, because it was just it was an idea, and it wasn't stated quite as callously as your comments were. And I'm sorry if you felt like I was calling you out. I tried very specifically not to mention you by name. And I do know that you're married to a teacher, which sometimes makes me really question some of the things that you do say, because you do see what we do every day. And so this was one of those times. As for the idea of the COLA, I mean, I think it's something to be considered. However, I definitely that would not be my first choice, because I spent, the greater part of this past year working my tail off to get that COLA for our teachers. And so, no, that wouldn't be my first choice. And if that were to come up, that would be something that would have to be negotiated, just like furlough days would. So if that's something that you guys decide you want to talk about, I'm more than willing to have that conversation, but no, it's definitely not going to be something that we would advocate.
Okay, Michelle, thank you for your response. I just see a big budget hole, and there's going to be some pain, and the sooner we get to that point of accepting that there's going to be some pain, the better off the kids will be.
There's accepting, Tom, and there's talking about it in a way that doesn't just feel like you're throwing people's jobs away.
Well, yeah, I didn't mean it.
That's what my ask would be, is to consider the fact that you're talking
point of order.
Yeah, correct, Michelle.
Point of order. We need to have some order.
Excuse me?
This is Irv, Aaron. I said point of order. We should not be dialoguing back and forth.
I agree. I'd like to just Tom finish the statement, then we can move on.
I agree with Irv. Both of us made our points. Thank you.
Do we have any other comments from the community? Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands up or folks desiring to speak. Appreciate everybody that did speak up and gave some great suggestions and some good dialogue about this process. I think we've got some areas to look at and move forward. So the next thing to look at would be holding of a third meeting. Like we said, we have a holiday coming up Monday, and we want to give our staff some time, and a furlough day on the back end of that. And we want to give our staff some time to make some of these, get the input from the rest of the administrators and our educators, and to come up with some ideas. Is June 2nd a problem for anybody? Seems like it's a good day. It's not a Monday. Tuesday, June 2nd at 7 o'clock. Does anybody have any objections to that being a targeted next meeting? Okay, I do need to make a motion with it. So I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we hold our next meeting on June 2nd to review the amendment to the proposed budget with the potential reductions as set forth by some of the financial input that we got yesterday.
I will second that.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Okay, since there is none, we'll have a vote. Debbie, if you could help with the voting process.
All right, Jonathan.
Aye.
Jennifer.
Aye.
Great. Janet.
Aye.
Tom.
Aye.
Lori.
Aye.
Shelley. Thank you. Irv.
Aye.
Aaron.
Yes.
Robin.
Aye.
Charles. Thumbs up, Charles. Nicole.
Aye.
Bert.
Aye.
And Peter. Peter Matska.
I think Peter's on mute.
Peter, can you unmute and give me your vote, please?
He's going to have to do that on his own.
Yeah, not sure. Maybe.
All right.
We'll try to capture that in alternate means potentially, but motion passes anyway here, so we're good to go anyway. So I think we've got a bit more of a path ahead of us here. I'm looking forward on the June 2nd to having another discussion on some more concrete ideas of what we can do to amend this budget. I appreciate everybody's time. This is not an easy subject to discuss. I do want to remind everybody that I will challenge everybody here, myself, every one of us here. Let's make sure that we are having a constructive tones in our discussion. I personally feel like a few times there were some moments tonight that got a little bit out of bounds and a little bit emotionally charged. Now, we're talking about our kids, so I get it. But I would just encourage everybody to take a deep breath, to have great ideas, share them. As you can see, we had a very open type forum tonight. There's going to be a lot of unknowns. We're going to have to be a little comfortable being uncomfortable with those unknowns. But number one, I want to say that we make sure that we have a professional atmosphere, and that we try to have a positive tone as best as we can. So moving forward, if we can all just make sure that we're all doing that, I think we'll have another great meeting here on June 2nd. So thank you again for everybody's time tonight. I really appreciate everybody's hard work on this and input. And I wish you all a good night, and take care, and we'll see you on June 2nd.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.